Chapter 301. Of course, the sky didn't literally rip apart. That would have required more paperwork. But anyone looking up at that moment would have been forgiven for thinking someone had taken a celestial can opener to the heavens and pried them open just a crack, just enough to let something truly unpleasant through. That something was Vorgoth Ironmaw, Pope of the Savage Communion, warlord of the 10,000 Dismembered, and general enthusiast of mayhem, bloodshed, and axes roughly the size of mid-sized vehicles. The moment his weapon came down, it didn't feel like an attack so much as a statement. Namely, this planet is in my way. And yet, Grand Marshal Maylin Potton, stoic, practical, terrifyingly composed Maylin, met it. One swing, one block, and for a breathless heartbeat the world didn't end. Around her, the air rippled with summoned power. A Dullahan shimmered into being beside her, head held beneath one arm and eyes glowing with cold detachment. An arch-lich rose on the other side, tall and ancient and slightly offended to be summoned at this hour. And anchoring them all was the most impressive of the lot. Maylin herself, clad in an armor of interlocking deep blue bone, swirling with energy so dense it made Erebus look like a first-year illusion spell. Kraken skeleton, Luna whispered in my head, voice unusually subdued. Right, Kraken, a 9-star beast. One of those creatures people tell horror stories about at military academies, usually right before sending students into a forest with a butter knife and a prayer. And Maylin had worn it, like a jacket. Her scythe crackled with enough power to power a small city, or at least wipe one off the map, and her face was as impassive as always, like she was scolding a particularly unruly vending machine. Vorgoth, of course, looked delighted. The Pope of the Savage Communion, one of the 5, a butcher in the body of a mountain with miasma seething from every pore, stood with his axe humming with both miasma and mana, as if it couldn't decide which apocalypse it preferred and had settled for both. Why was he here? That was the question. Because this wasn't supposed to happen. Not now. Not yet. This wasn't in the novel. So why here? Why now? The vehicle was going further away, but what was the point? I knew. Maylin was monstrously strong, but she wasn't a radiant ranker. She hadn't taken that step. She was weaker than Vorgoth. She would die in this fight. The truth of this realization hit me like a physical blow even as the hover truck continued to retreat. Rachel's fingers dug into my arm, her eyes wide with horror as she watched what was unfolding. Rose's face had gone pale, her usual composure cracking. Even Clanna was fully awake, her expression grim. "We have to go back," I said, the words torn from me before I could think better of it. "You heard the Marshal's orders," the driver replied, not taking his eyes off the path ahead. "We're to return to the outpost and report." Behind us, the battle began in earnest. Maylin moved first, her scythe carving a perfect arc through the air as she activated her scythe domain. The space around her warped, reality bending to accommodate her mastery of the weapon. Each swing didn't just travel through space but seemed to define it, creating zones where her control was absolute. It wasn't the highest level of martial ability, that would be unity, the perfect melding of self and weapon, but it was close. Vorgoth parried with contemptuous ease, his axe unity allowing him to counter as if the weapon were a natural extension of himself. Where Maylin's scythe domain created zones of control, his axe unity simply ignored them, cutting through the fabric of her technique with the casual disregard of someone swatting a fly. "Is this all the Western continent can offer?" he taunted, his voice like gravel being crushed. "Their second strongest?" Maylin didn't bother responding with words. Instead, darkness gathered around her. Not the purple-black of conventional dark mana, but the absolute void of deep dark. It pooled around her like liquid night, then surged forward in jagged spears aimed at Vorgoth's heart. The Axe King laughed, a sound like mountains collapsing. Fire erupted from his body. Not natural flame but miasma-infused inferno, sick green and sunset orange intertwined in a blasphemous dance. The deep dark spears met his fire miasma in a catastrophic collision, the resulting shockwave flattening the terrain for half a kilometer in all directions. The Dullahan and Arch-Lich moved in perfect synchronization with Maylin, as if the three shared a single mind. The Lich hurled spells of such complexity they resembled mathematical equations made lethal, while the Dullahan's sword left trails of absolute cold in its wake. Together with Maylin's scythe, they created a three-pronged attack that would have annihilated most opponents. Vorgoth was not most opponents. His axe blurred, becoming less a weapon and more a concept, the idea of severance made manifest. Where it passed, connections broke. The Lich's spells unraveled mid-flight. The Dullahan's sword strikes hit nothing but air, and Malin's scythe, meeting the axe directly, shuddered under the impact. For a moment they were locked together, power against power. Malin's face remained impassive, but sweat beaded on her forehead, the first sign of strain I'd ever seen from her. Vorgitha's expression was one of fierce joy, like a connoisseur sampling a particularly fine vintage. "You fight well, human," he acknowledged, pushing forward. "Few can stand against me for even this long." Malin disengaged, leaping backward as her summons regrouped. The kraken armor around her flickered, parts of it crumbling under the strain of channeling so much power. She raised her hand, and the deep dark responded again, this time forming complex geometric patterns that rotated around her like the world's most lethal mathematical model. "Vorgith Ironmaw," she finally spoke, her voice steady despite everything. "You're a long way from your temples." "The world is my temple," he replied, rolling his massive shoulders. "And all battlefields my altar." He raised his axe high, and the sky itself seemed to darken in response. Fire miasma spiraled around the weapon, condensing until the blade glowed white-hot. At the same time he channeled pure mana through it. Not the refined, controlled mana of human mages, but raw, primal power that made the air itself groan in protest. "But enough talk," he said, his voice dropping to a rumble. "Show me what the Grand Marshal of the Western Continent can really do." The attack that followed defied description. It wasn't just an axe strike. It was annihilation given form, a concept rather than a physical action. The air split, the ground beneath it sublimated, and reality itself seemed to protest. Malin met it with everything she had. Deep dark erupted from her in a catastrophic wave, her summons dissolving into it, lending their power to hers. The kraken armor fully activated, ancient runes blazing across its surface as it channeled power that no human frame should have been able to contain. Her scythe, wreathed in both deep dark and death energy from her gift, swept up to meet Vorgitha's descending axe. The collision was beyond spectacular. It was nearly biblical. Light and darkness, fire and void, miasma and mana, all crashing together in a single point of cosmic absurdity. For one impossible moment the two forces balanced, neither yielding. Then Malin's defense cracked. The deep dark wavered. The kraken armor fractured along ancient fault lines. And still her expression remained composed, accepting, as if she'd always known this would be the outcome. With a sound like the world ending, her defense shattered completely. The backlash hurled her backward, her body carving a trench through the earth before coming to rest nearly 50 meters away. Her scythe lay broken beside her, its blade cracked clean through. The kraken armor hung in tatters, more suggestion than substance now. Vorgith lowered his axe, looking almost disappointed that it was over. He approached slowly, savoring the moment, his massive form casting a long shadow over Malin's fallen figure. "You fought well," he repeated, and there was genuine respect in his voice. "Few humans have ever forced me to exert myself to this degree. Had you taken that final step, had you reached Radiant rank, perhaps this would have ended differently." Malin struggled to her knees. "It's not over," she said quietly. "No." Vorgith raised his axe once more. "Then show me." She gathered what little strength remained, deep dark flickering weakly around her hands. But it was clear to everyone watching that it was over. The gap between peak immortal and low radiant might seem small on paper, but in reality, it was an unbridgeable chasm. "Why?" she asked, staring up at him. "Why come yourself? Why now?" Vorgitha's massive head tilted slightly. "Because change is coming. The balance shifts. And I wish to see for myself what the Western Continent could offer against that tide." The axe began its descent, a perfect execution stroke that would separate Malin's head from her shoulders with surgical precision. I don't remember making the decision to move. The impact when our weapons met should have shattered every bone in my body. Should have. But it didn't. Erebus blazed with a light I'd never seen before, absorbing and redirecting the catastrophic force of Vorgitha's strike. My arms trembled. My legs threatened to buckle, but somehow, impossibly, I held. "Well," he said, his voice somewhere between amused and intrigued. "What do we have here?" Chapter 302. Of course, Vorgith held back against me. If he hadn't, I would have obviously died, no questions asked. There wouldn't have been enough of me left to fill a thimble, just a fine red mist and perhaps one boot sailing through the air in a tragically comical arc. I was too weak to hope to withstand him. The gap between us wasn't just a gap. It was a canyon so wide you couldn't see the other side through the clouds. Like comparing a kitchen match to a supernova. A paper cut to the Grand Canyon. Well, you get the idea. So why did I? Well, it was logical. Vorgoth Ironmaw was the least rational of all the 5 popes. This made him both the most and least dangerous of them. His unpredictability was a weapon in itself. No model could predict what someone would do when their decision tree looked like it had been drawn by a toddler during an earthquake. In the end, he moved according to his base desires. And what he desired was to kill the strongest. To face worthy opponents, to test himself against them, to feel the thrill of challenging combat. He was a connoisseur of violence, a sommelier of battle who found the bouquet of weak opponents distastefully bland. In the end, I was way too weak to hope to fight against him. But I could give him an impulse. I could be interesting enough to make him curious rather than immediately homicidal. That was the way for me to survive. Nightingale, did you not go? Maylin began. Her voice strained through gritted teeth, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth. Even on her knees, broken and defeated, she maintained that aura of command. You defied my order. Yes, Grand Marshal, I replied, not taking my eyes off Vorgoth's massive form. The Orc Pope towered over us both. His green skin crisscrossed with ritual scars that pulsed with internal power. His tusks gleamed in the strange half-light created by the residual energy of their battle. Because I will save you. Erebus trembled in my arm, the weapon humming with a frequency I'd never felt before. It wasn't just vibrating, it was resonating like it recognized something in Vorgoth's axe, some kindred quality that both attracted and repelled it. For the first time in a long time, I was genuinely afraid. Not the kind of fear that gets your heart pumping before a test or a difficult fight. This was primal, cellular-level terror, the kind that makes your organs try to find the nearest exit. My mouth went dust-dry, and time seemed to stretch like taffy. The man in front of me was as strong as Evelyn Alaric, Alastair Creighton, Charlotte Alaric, and the others at the peak. Beings whose casual gestures could level cities, whose disagreements reshaped coastlines. The only one who could beat him 100% of the time was Magnus Dracar, the Martial King. But I believed in my knowledge of him. I'd studied every scrap of information about the 5 popes, analyzed every recorded engagement, memorized their patterns and preferences. Knowledge was power, not enough power to win, but maybe enough to survive. So I moved forward. In a burst of wind magic, with time magic accelerating me and my sword wrapped in deep dark, I closed the distance between us. The wind gathered beneath my feet, propelling me forward like a bullet. Time slowed around me, or rather, I moved faster relative to it, everything else seeming to crawl while I operated at normal speed. Deep dark coiled around Erebus, not just covering the blade but seeming to extend it, to make it both more and less real simultaneously. And I swung down. The strike was perfect, or it should have been. The culmination of thousands of hours of training, the precise application of multiple magical disciplines, the ideal angle of attack against even the most formidable opponent. My sword was stopped by the mere miasma emanating from him. Not his weapon, not his armor, not even his skin. Just the aura of corrupted energy that surrounded him like a toxic cloud. Erebus hit it and simply halted, as if I'd tried to cut through the concept of solidity itself. Are you trying to excite me with this? Vorgoth asked, his voice like continents grinding together. He hadn't even bothered to move, still standing in exactly the same position, his axe resting casually against his shoulder. His eyes, an unsettling orange-red, like the heart of a dying star, regarded me with the mild interest one might show a moderately unusual insect. I'm just getting started, I responded as I gritted my teeth, enamel creaking under the pressure. Sweat beaded on my forehead, not from exertion but from the raw, crushing presence of being so close to something so absurdly powerful. I activated soul resonance. The strongest ability I wanted. The strongest. It was right in front of me. That strike which destroyed the sky itself. The technique that had shattered Malin's defenses like glass. That had broken through deep dark and death energy and the armor of a 9-star beast as if they were no more substantial than morning mist. Arthur, Luna said, her voice unusually urgent in my mind. Don't try. I ignored her. That axe unity of Vorgoth. I focused on it with every fiber of my being, every neuron, every mode of mana in my system. I stared not at the physical axe but at the concept behind it, the perfect melding of wielder and weapon, the dissolution of boundaries between self and tool until they became a single entity expressing a single purpose. I could see it now, really see it. Not just the physical movements, but the underlying structure. It was like looking at the source code of reality itself, lines of cosmic programming that defined how object and wielder interacted. Vorgith and his axe weren't two things, they were one thing that happened to occupy two spaces. The axe didn't move because he swung it. It moved because it was him, an extension of his will made manifest in steel and malice. Copied it, and molded it to fit me, into my own sword unity. Instantly, I felt my mind go blank as it was filled with information. It was like trying to pour an ocean into a teacup. Data, understanding, awareness. It all flooded in, overwhelming my consciousness in a tidal wave of pure comprehension. Too much. This was too much. Imagine trying to understand everything at once. Not just facts but the relationships between them, the metastructures that gave them meaning, the patterns that connected them across time and space. Imagine having the entire library of human knowledge downloaded directly into your brain in the span of a heartbeat, without index or organization. My vision blurred, darkness encroaching from the edges. Blood vessels burst in my eyes, tiny red spiderwebs spreading across my field of view. I could feel something fundamental beginning to give way, like structural beams groaning before collapse. Luna, filter this. I yelled internally as I felt her presence lighten the burden. She moved through my consciousness like a master librarian, categorizing, prioritizing, shelving what could wait and highlighting what was immediately crucial. The flood didn't stop, but suddenly there were channels, dams, reservoirs to manage it. My nose bled as pure light encased my sword. Not droplets but a stream, metallic and warm on my upper lip. The pure light wasn't the usual soft golden glow but something harsher, more demanding. A white-hot brilliance that seemed to cut through reality itself, leaving afterimages burned into the air. I couldn't copy Unity, it was too high level. Like trying to run cutting-edge software on obsolete hardware. My mind simply lacked the capacity to fully contain and execute such a concept. The information was there, but my ability to process and implement it was insufficient. But this was the next evolution of my God Flash. The technique I'd been developing, refining, pushing to its limits. A momentary perfect synchronization between myself and my weapon. Not the permanent, continuous unity that Vorgith achieved, but a single instant of absolute harmony. If unity was a perfect marriage, this was a perfect first date, brief, but potentially life-changing. God Flash, absolute. I felt it crystallize within me, the technique taking shape not just as movement but as understanding. For just one moment, one attack, I could achieve what Vorgith maintained effortlessly, the dissolution of boundaries between wielder and weapon, the expression of pure martial will. Erebus wasn't just glowing now, it was transforming, responding to the change in me. The blade elongated, not physically but conceptually, becoming more than a sword, more than a tool. For this single instant it was an idea given form, the platonic ideal of a cutting edge. Vorgith saw it. I knew he did. His eyes widened slightly, the casual disinterest replaced by something sharper, more focused. The recognition of something unexpected. Something potentially interesting. His axe moved from his shoulder, almost lazily, as if he were merely shifting its position for comfort rather than preparing to counter my attack. Time compressed around us, the world narrowing to just this moment, just this exchange. Everything else. Malin's labored breathing, the distant sound of the hover truck, the wind across the wasteland, faded into irrelevance. I exhaled once, fully, completely, emptying my lungs of air and my mind of doubt. Then I struck. Chapter 303. The collision between my God Flash, Absolute, and Vorgith's casual defense wasn't so much a meeting of forces as it was a brief, one-sided conversation. My attack, the culmination of everything I had, everything I was, compressed into a single perfect moment of martial expression, met his axe, and stopped. Not dramatically, not with some cosmic explosion or reality-shattering backlash. It just ceased, like a wave breaking against a cliff face. All that power and momentum simply dissipated, leaving nothing behind but a faint ripple in the air. Vorgith hadn't even swung his axe. He'd merely raised it, letting my strike land. Evilous, glowing with pure light, touched the edge of his weapon and could go no further. Vorgith said. Just that. One syllable containing more evaluation than most doctoral dissertations. He tilted his head, eyes gleaming as he regarded me with new interest. Those volcanic eyes narrowed slightly, no longer seeing just another insect but something worthy of actual attention. Sword intent, he said. the words falling from his mouth like stones. Without even reaching low integration rank. I didn't respond. Couldn't really. The backlash from attempting God Flash. Absolute had left me momentarily hollow. My mana circuit scorched. My nervous system jangling like overtuned piano wire. I could taste blood in my mouth. Feel it trickling from my ears. My vision kept trying to split into two separate images that refused to align properly. Interesting, Vorgoth continued, sounding genuinely thoughtful. Very interesting. A human who can glimpse unity without the requisite power base. The potential. He was still talking when the world around us erupted in golden light. One moment we stood on barren ground. The next, golden roses burst from the earth in a cascading wave, their stems intertwining to form a rapidly expanding dome around Vorgoth. The flowers weren't just beautiful. They were saturated with pure light so intense it made the air shimmer, a direct counter to the miasma that surrounded the Axe King. Rachel. Her distinctive energy signature was unmistakable. At the same time, reality itself seemed to hiccup. The space around Vorgoth twisted, dimensions folding in on themselves in a way that made my eyes water just watching it. Simple physics, things like direction, distance, and even time, became more like suggestions than rules within that warped bubble. Rose. Her paradox manipulation reaching levels I'd never seen before. They hadn't fled with the truck. Of course they hadn't. They had doubled back, waited for the right moment, and were now launching a coordinated attack against a being that could snuff out planets. If I hadn't been so busy trying not to collapse, I might have laughed at the sheer audacity of it all. Vorgoth, to his credit, didn't immediately obliterate them. Instead, he looked around at the golden rose garden with something approaching appreciation, like a man admiring an unexpectedly interesting piece of street art. The Saintess's purification, he observed, and reality distortion as well. More interesting specimens. Then he laughed. A sound like an avalanche set to music, terrible and magnificent at once. The miasma around him intensified, shifting from a passive aura to an active force. Green-black energy spiraled outward in a shockwave, tearing through the golden roses and shattering the warped space, as if they were no more substantial than soap bubbles. The backlash sent Rachel and Rose tumbling backward. They'd been hiding behind a ridge about 50 meters away, but the force of Vorgoth's casual dismissal of their attack hurled them into the open, their bodies leaving small trenches in the ground as they skidded to a halt near Maylin and me. Was that your plan? Vorgoth asked, sounding amused rather than angry. A distraction while your friends attacked? Not entirely without merit, but... He gestured at the devastation around us, the golden rose petals now withering and crumbling to dust. Inadequate. I managed to stand straighter, placing myself between the Axe King and my fallen comrades. Erebus felt unnaturally heavy in my hand, but I raised it nonetheless. We're not done, I said, though my voice sounded distant even to my own ears. No, Vorgoth agreed, surprising me. You're not. Not yet. He studied the four of us. Maylin still on her knees but defiant, Rachel and Rose struggling to rise, me barely standing, with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. There was amusement there, certainly, but also something else. Something almost like approval? You know, he said conversationally, as if we were discussing the weather rather than the imminent end of our lives. It's been a long time since humans have surprised me. A very long time. He lowered his axe, resting its head on the ground. The impact sent small tremors through the earth. I came here to test the Western continent's defenses, to see if they warranted my personal attention. His gaze moved to Maylin. The Grand Marshal fought well, better than I expected, but still not enough to concern me. Then his eyes found mine again. But you... He reached into a pouch at his waist and withdrew something that glowed with sickly green light in his massive palm. I propose an oath, he said. A mana and miasma oath. Binding and unbreakable. I stared at him, trying to process what I was hearing. Oaths of this nature weren't offered lightly, especially not by beings of Vorgoth's stature. What kind of oath? I asked, caution overriding exhaustion. Vorgoth's mouth stretched into what might generously be called a smile. 8 years, he said. In 8 years you and I will duel to the death. One-on-one. No interference, no escape. A proper battle between worthy opponents. I could feel Rachel and Rose tensing behind me. Even Maylin's breath caught. And in return? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. In return I spare you today. All of you. His gaze swept over our small group. And I will not attack the Western continent. For now. Not until our appointed time. 8 years. 8 years of peace for the frontier. 8 years for me to grow, to prepare, to reach the levels I would need to even have a chance against him. 8 years until certain death. Or perhaps not so certain. The future wasn't fixed. 8 years was a lot of time to change, to evolve, to find advantages that even Vorgith couldn't anticipate. I glanced back at my companions. Rose's face was pale but composed, her analytical mind clearly racing through scenarios and probabilities. Rachel looked terrified but resolute, her hands still glowing faintly with golden energy. And Malin's expression was unreadable, but she gave me the small permission, understanding, maybe even a hint of respect. I turned back to Vorgith. 8 years, Arthur Nightingale, Vorgith said, my name sounding strange in his rumbling voice. Grow strong. Reach your potential. Become worthy of a glorious death. With that, he turned and strode away. The air split before him, just as it had when he arrived, and he stepped through the rift without looking back. The tier sealed itself behind him, leaving only disturbed air and devastated landscape as evidence he'd ever been there. For a moment, none of us spoke. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by our ragged breathing and the faint sound of wind across the wasteland. Arthur, Rachel finally said, her voice barely above a whisper, did you just make a death pact with one of the popes? I finished for her. Yeah, I think I did. 8 years, Rose murmured, calculations practically visible behind her eyes. Maylin struggled to her feet, her usually immaculate uniform torn and stained with blood. The Kraken armor had completely disintegrated, leaving only faint blue residue on her skin. That, she said, her voice raspy but steady, was either the bravest or the most foolish thing I've ever witnessed, possibly both. He would have killed us all otherwise, I pointed out. She nodded. Yes, he would have. Her golden eyes studied me with new intensity. 8 years. The Western continent gets 8 years of peace because of what you did today. Put like that, it sounded almost noble. A sacrifice for the greater good. But we all knew better. This wasn't nobility, it was desperation, opportunism, and perhaps a bit of calculated gambling. We should get back to the outpost, Maylin said, all business despite her injuries. There's much to discuss, much to prepare. As we made our way back to the hover truck, which had returned once Vorgith departed, I could feel the weight of what had just happened settling over me. Not just the oath itself, but what it represented. A deadline in the most literal sense of the word. I touched my chest, feeling the faint pulse of the oath beneath my skin. It wasn't just a promise. It was a timer, counting down with each heartbeat. 8 years to live. 8 years to become someone who could defy those odds. The irony wasn't lost on me. In trying to save everyone, I'd bound myself to a death sentence. But perhaps that had always been my path. Perhaps this was just making official what had always been inevitable. A clever move, Luna commented. How do you figure? I asked silently. 8 years is a long time, she replied. It will be enough, I replied. If I couldn't even beat a pope in 8 years, I wasn't good enough to survive in the future of this world. Chapter 304. Arthur sat in the chair like a man awaiting trial, except the judge was smiling at him like a shark with tenure. The headmaster's office smelled faintly of cinnamon and administrative disapproval, a curious blend that somehow amplified the sensation of being in profound trouble. Across from him, Headmaster Eva Lopez had her hands folded in front of her, her violet eyes gleaming with that specific light reserved for paperwork disasters and students who somehow survive things they absolutely shouldn't have. The late afternoon sun filtering through her office windows cast her silvery hair in a halo that did nothing to soften the predatory curve of her smile. Arthur, she said, voice sweet enough to cause cavities. I just need to know one little thing. Arthur blinked. Yes. He attempted to look appropriately contrite, though the effect was somewhat undermined by the fact that he was still wearing his field uniform, complete with scorch marks and what appeared to be miasma-tinged dust. Why is it? She began, tapping one perfectly manicured nail against her desk with metronomic precision, that every single time, you go somewhere, something explodes, implodes, or starts a small war. He opened his mouth. She raised a hand, the gesture reminiscent of someone halting an advancing army. No, wait, I'm not finished. Because this time, you've managed to get the Pope of the Savage Communion to personally stroll onto a battlefield, nearly flatten one of the Western continent's immortal rank marshals, and then leave because of you. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing to violet slits. Arthur, do you know what this means? I did well, Arthur offered, somewhat hopefully, straightening in his chair as if good posture might somehow mitigate the enormity of what had happened. Eva stood up and began pacing, the sort of pacing that meant someone was either going to start a war or request a transfer to a nice quiet farming moon. Her heels clicked against the polished floor with the rhythmic intensity of a countdown sequence. Do well? Do well? You covered a disaster of your own making with heroism. It's like watching someone set a building on fire, and then receive a medal for rescuing everyone inside. That's not fair, Arthur protested, indignation temporarily overriding his self-preservation instincts. It wasn't my mess. Vorgith just showed up. I don't control the movements of popes. Yes, where you were. She threw her hands up, a gesture that encompassed both Arthur and the apparent cosmic joke that was his existence. Of all the places in all the continents, he just happened to materialize exactly where you were standing. Coincidence, Arthur insisted, though even to his own ears the word sounded hollow. Arthur, when you sneeze, 3 guilds go bankrupt and a dragon comes out of retirement. Coincidences don't orbit you like moons. They crash into you at terminal velocity. Arthur leaned back, folding his arms across his chest, a defensive posture that did little to hide the stubborn set of his jaw. Look, I did save Marshal Maylin. That counts for something, right? Yes. And now the entire Western Front thinks you're some kind of prodigal war god sent from the heavens to smite miasmic heretics with good hair and teenage angst. She pinched the bridge of her nose, a gesture that seemed to be restraining an impressive arsenal of profanity. Do you have any idea how complicated this makes diplomacy? The other academies are already sending inquiries. The southern continent wants a formal explanation. I have 17 messages from various military commands asking if you're available for strategic consultation, which is bureaucrat speak for, can we borrow your walking catastrophe for a while? But it wasn't my fault, Arthur said. Eva sighed, rubbing her temples like she was trying to massage out a full-scale war. The gesture softened her momentarily, revealing the genuine concern beneath her exasperation. You're not a student, Arthur. You're a seasonal event. You're what happens when the universe decides the status quo has gotten too comfortable. She sat back down, looking at him with an expression that said she would love to strangle him but unfortunately needed him alive for several international agreements. I suppose next you'll tell me the Pope offered you tea. Arthur blinked. No. Just a duel. Eva closed her eyes. Of course he did. She took a deep breath, as if physically inhaling patience. Because a simple, I'll kill you later, would be too straightforward for an eldritch horror with anger management issues and an axe the size of a small country. An 8-year oath, Arthur said, with the calm composure of someone who had just agreed to a friendly match of chess and not a duel with a mass-murdering fire god. In 8 years, Vorgith and I will fight, as per the mana and miasma oath we made. Eva slumped into her chair with all the grace of a queen resigning from her throne. Ugh! She muttered into her hands. Of course he made an oath. What's next? Tea and scones with a demon lord. Perhaps a friendly game of cards with the bone witch of the northern wastes. She looked at Arthur, who looked entirely too pleased with himself for someone who had essentially provoked one of the world's most terrifying warlords into putting him on a magical hit list with a countdown timer. The boy had a gift for turning catastrophe into opportunity that would be admirable if it wasn't so terrifying. Well, she said, pinching the bridge of her nose. As ridiculous as this all is, I suppose it was a good idea on your part. 8 years is a significant buffer. If anyone can surpass Vorgith in 8 years, it's you. She paused, her expression shifting to something more calculating. Or so the betting pool currently says. Arthur brightened. Speaking of which, he said, in a tone that should have come with a contractual warning, I'd like a reward. Eva blinked at him, momentarily struck speechless. A reward. He nodded solemnly, as if requesting compensation for completing a particularly difficult homework assignment rather than surviving an encounter with an apocalyptic entity. Yes, I was placed in unfair danger due to the Academy's arrangements. This situation could have been avoided if proper security protocols had been in place or if the frontier had better intelligence networks. Also, I've essentially secured 8 years of peace for the Western continent. That's worth something, isn't it? Eva's teeth audibly clenched. Un fair danger? Arthur, this is a combat academy, not a tea party in a panic room. The brochure literally says, Preparing tomorrow's leaders for a dangerous world. It doesn't specify that the dangerous world won't occasionally include encounters with ancient evils. Still, Arthur shrugged, the picture of reasonable entitlement. I was very nearly chopped in half by the Axe King. That's got to be worth at least a new training facility, or some rare resources, perhaps access to the restricted section of the library. Eva stared at him like she was deciding between giving him what he wanted or launching him into low orbit. You're very lucky you're cute, she muttered. Arthur raised an eyebrow. Pardon? Nothing, she snapped, spinning around to glare at a data screen as if it had personally offended her. You'll get your reward. Eventually. Something suitably ridiculous to match your habit of collecting world-ending enemies like trading cards. I'll have to consult with the board, of course. And the military. And possibly an exorcist, just to make sure you haven't been possessed by a chaos spirit. Arthur smiled, ever so slightly smug. Thank you, headmaster. Your generosity is noted and appreciated. Out. Go. Before someone else declares war on you. Or worse, asks for your autograph. She waved a dismissive hand toward the door. And don't think we're done discussing this. The full debriefing will happen tomorrow, with the entire faculty present. I want to make sure everyone gets to enjoy watching you explain how you managed to turn a routine reconnaissance mission into an international incident. Arthur rose from his seat, offering a bow that managed to be both respectful and vaguely insolent at the same time. I look forward to it. Should I prepare visual aids? Get out. As Arthur turned to leave, Eva called after him, her voice softening almost imperceptibly. And Arthur? Try not to challenge any other deities to combat before dinner, would you? The cafeteria staff are still recovering from the last time you requested battle rations. Arthur grinned over his shoulder.
No promises, headmaster.
But I'll do my best. The door closed behind him with a satisfying click, leaving Eva alone with her thoughts and the looming administrative nightmare that would undoubtedly follow. She sighed deeply, reaching for a crystal decanter on her desk that definitely didn't contain water. That boy, she murmured, is either going to save the world or destroy it, possibly both in that order. Outside the headmaster's office, Arthur found himself face to face with Marshal Malin Potton. The immortal rank necromancer was leaning against the wall, arms folded, her golden eyes as unreadable as ever. Despite the recent battle, she looked immaculate, her blue hair perfectly arranged, her uniform spotless. Only the faint shadows beneath her eyes betrayed the strain of her encounter with Vorgoth. Nightingale, she said, her voice maintaining its usual flat cadence. I see you survived the headmaster. Arthur straightened instinctively. Marshal, I didn't expect to see you here. Clearly, she pushed away from the wall, studying him with that piercing gaze that seemed to catalog every weakness and strength simultaneously. I came to thank you. Arthur blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. Thank me? Is there an echo in this hallway? Malin's expression didn't change, but something that might have been amusement flickered in her golden eyes. Yes, thank you, for what you did on the frontier. It was reckless, stupid, and completely against orders. She paused. It was also the reason I'm still breathing. I couldn't just leave you there, Arthur said simply. Malin studied him for a long moment. Most would have. Self-preservation is a powerful instinct, especially when faced with a being like Vorgoth. I'm not most people. No, she agreed. You're not, which is why I've recommended you for the Star of Valor, the highest military decoration the Western continent can bestow on a civilian. Arthur's eyes widened. That's unexpected. So was watching a student stand between me and the Axe King. For the first time, a ghost of a smile touched Malin's lips. The commendation comes with certain privileges. Access to military archives, priority requisition rights for rare materials, things that might prove useful to someone preparing for a duel in 8 years. Understanding dawned in Arthur's eyes. That's very generous, Marshal. It's pragmatic, she corrected. Your survival serves the Western continent's interests. And she hesitated, something almost human flickering across her usually impassive features. And I pay my debts, Nightingale. Remember that. She straightened, once again the perfect image of military discipline. You have 8 years. Make them count. And when the time comes, she fixed him with that golden stare. Don't die. It would reflect poorly on my training. Chapter 305. Ren's jaw clenched as the coppery taste of blood hit his tongue, thick and bitter as old coins. His boots dragged furrows through the cracked terrain, the soles grating against the earth like nails across glass. Every joint in his arm screamed as he held it aloft, the weight of his fist suddenly reminiscent of an angry planet, a crushing gravity that threatened to pull him into the dirt. His entire body trembled, not from fear, at least that's what he told himself, but from the slow, cruel collapse of a body being asked to do one thing too many. Each breath felt like inhaling broken glass, each heartbeat a thunderous toll that counted down to failure. The beast before him bellowed, a rumbling avalanche of sound that flattened the air. The miasmic bear, an absurdly overgrown slab of muscle and spite, was a 6-star monster of the sort normally reserved for military campaigns and cautionary bedtime tales. Its fur, dark as midnight and slick with corruption, rippled over muscles dense as iron. Ren's vision blurred, a smear of dark fur and hellish red eyes blotting out the sky. The bear's paw arced toward him like a collapsing mountain, trailing wisps of corrosive energy. His god's eyes flared to life, tracing the swipe with pinpoint accuracy, every muscle and tendon in the creature's massive limb rendered in perfect detail. He knew exactly where it would land, how much force it would carry, the precise angle at which his bones would shatter. Unfortunately, foreknowledge meant bugger all when your limbs moved like wet rope. He braced for the end, a strange calm washing over him despite everything. So this was how the story of Renkagu concluded, not as the second hero, but as a cautionary footnote in some other legend. And then the end didn't come. A clang of mana on miasma cracked the air like thunder, and the world jolted to a halt. The strike had been parried. Standing in front of him, casually, almost insultingly so, was Lucifer Windward, blonde, smiling like he'd just strolled into a tea party instead of the jaws of death, and glowing with that bloody righteous light he always seemed to carry like it was stitched into his bones. Ren's body, no longer forced upright by sheer suicidal will, gave out. He slumped, one knee thudding against the ground, the rest of him not far behind. His breath came in shallow gasps as he watched the bear turn its fury to Lucifer. Lucifer, of course, looked thrilled. "Looks like you're the leader of this little picnic," he said to the beast, white mana flooding around his sword in clean arcs. But it wasn't just aura. There was something else there now, something more refined, more concentrated, like liquid light given purpose and direction. Sword intent. Ren blinked, then blinked again, as if trying to dismiss the hallucination of advancement. He stared at the light dancing around the blade, the hum of the air bending to Lucifer's will, the perfect harmony between mana, weapon, and wielder. The bastard had done it. Reached sword intent before even scratching the surface of integration. Ren had trained until his skin bled and his mind frayed at the edges. He'd eaten, slept, and breathed combat, all because he carried the bloodline of the first hero, the weight of expectation draped across his shoulders like a leaden cloak. Every moment of his life had been preparation, every breath a step on a path laid out before his birth. And now here was Lucifer, golden boy of the gods, cutting down monsters like it was Tuesday, the light around his blade singing with a perfection that shouldn't have been possible yet. A bitter chuckle slipped from Ren's lips, tasting of blood and resignation. "How unfair can you be, you damn god?" He whispered to no one in particular, the words lost in the cacophony of battle. Above him, streaks of elemental light, fire, lightning, water, all wrapped in that pristine white mana, shot from Lucifer's form as he clashed with the miasma beast. Each movement was elegant, clean, and decisive. The bear roared again, this time in pain. Ren watched, chest hollow, as the battle unfolded. It wasn't jealousy, not entirely. No, it was emptiness. The cold, quiet kind that came when you realized you were the supporting actor in someone else's legend. The bit player whose struggle would be condensed to a line or two in the story of someone greater. "I too want to reach it, damn it," Ren thought as he gritted his teeth, feeling the enamel creak under the pressure. Did he not desire it enough? Had his hunger been insufficient, his ambition too tame? Did he not strive for it enough? Were the countless hours, the broken bones, the sleepless nights all just hollow gestures rather than true sacrifice? Then, did he not deserve it? "I want it too," Ren said as his violet eyes gleamed with something raw and desperate, a hunger that transcended mere ambition. Ren had always crushed the weakest. That was his way of fighting. Not out of cruelty, though many saw it that way, but out of conviction. The strong defined the world. The weak inhabited it. To rise meant to step on those below, to ensure your place by proving others unworthy of theirs. He wanted to sit at the throne overlooking everyone else, not for the adulation, but for the validation that his path, his truth, was correct. He wanted to remove the unworthy ones, those who reached for greatness without the backbone to support it, those who played at being heroes without understanding the cost. That was why he had tried to crush Arthur. The boy without gift or bloodline who dared to stand in Class A, who presumed to walk among giants while bearing the stature of a common man. But even Arthur had surpassed him, closing gaps that should have been uncrossable, advancing with a speed that defied all logic and precedent. And Lucifer, who Run had thought he was closing the gap to, who had always been ahead but at least within sight, had suddenly increased the distance by unlocking a second gift, by achieving sword intent as if it were nothing more significant than learning a new dance step. Why can I not reach it? Ren thought as he reached out to them in his mind. These boys who moved like men, these students who fought like legends. He saw them climbing heights he couldn't touch, standing on peaks he couldn't scale despite the blood in his veins, the legacy in his name. The level Arthur and Lucifer stood at. The level beyond him. He deserved it. By birth, by blood, by every drop of sweat and pain he had poured into his training. He needed to have it. Not just to fulfill expectations or silence critics, but because something in him would wither and die if he didn't. If he could have it, he would throw away everything. Pride, fear, doubt, restraint. All of it meaningless compared to the ascension he craved. Because all he had was his fist. More than the expectations of becoming the second hero. More than the gazes from his family, heavy with assumption and demand. Ren's mind wandered to the past, reaching back through the layers of training and trial to the very core of his being. When he was born, he was the talented monster, the child who could shatter stone before he could properly speak, who fought with an instinct that terrified his teachers. But more than that, more than the accolades and the whispers of prodigy that followed him like shadows, he had wanted to hone his fist. Not because it was expected, not because it was his birthright, but because something in him recognized it as truth. His truth unvarnished and absolute. To surpass everyone. To reach even the gods watching above. To stand alone at the summit, not as Renkagu, heir to the first hero, but as himself, defined by his strength and nothing else. That is my true desire, Ren thought, the realization crystallizing in his mind like frost on glass. And in that moment of clarity he discarded everything. The rivalry he felt with Lucifer and Arthur. Gone. Like ash in the wind. The inferiority complex that had eaten at him since arriving at Mythos. Dissolved. Meaningless. The admiration he secretly harbored for those who advanced beyond him. Vanished, irrelevant. All that was left? He looked at his right fist, still held aloft despite the agony, despite the trembling, despite everything. That was all that was left. A simple truth, distilled to its essence. His fist, his path, his strength. Not the fist of the second hero. Not the fist that would live up to a legacy. Just his fist. Ren's fist. In the clearing of his mind, in the vacuum left by discarding all those tangled emotions and expectations, something new began to form. Not an intention shaped by others, but a pure, singular focus. A truth so fundamental it transcended technique or talent. Fist intent. The understanding that the fist was not just a weapon but an extension of will, not just a tool but a manifestation of identity. The fist did not serve Ren. It was Ren, distilled to its most essential form. He puked blood in front of him as a rush of mana filled his body, not flowing into his circuits but becoming them, reshaping them according to this new understanding. It wasn't just power, it was clarity, purpose given form, desire made manifest. Strength he didn't have was now found in abundance, pouring into him not from some external source but from within, from the deepest parts of himself that had always known this truth but had been clouded by expectations and comparisons. Second stage of the integration process was completed for him, not through gradual accumulation of power but through the sudden, violent stripping away of everything that wasn't essential. As he rose to his feet, blood dripping from his lips, his fist began to glow. Not with the white light of Lucifer's divine blessing, but with something darker, more primal. The violet light of ambition distilled to its purest form, of will unshackled from expectation. The miasmic bear, sensing a new threat, turned its attention back to Ron, red eyes narrowing with malicious intelligence. Lucifer paused in his assault, sensing the change, the shift in the very air around his fellow student. Ren smiled, a hard, tight expression that held no joy, only certainty. This was his path. Not heroism, not legacy, not the approval of others. Just the fist. His fist. And it was enough. Chapter 306. Prelude to Inter-Academy Festival. It was official. Another medal. The Star of Valor, no less. Pinned proudly to the breast of the boy, who'd apparently made a habit of surviving hopeless encounters and walking away with decorations instead of common-sense trauma. The highest civilian honor in the entire Western continent. Which meant, by my count, I was now 2 for 2, since I'd already been told I'd be getting the Medal for Merit from the Slatemark Empire. I exhaled, running a finger along the cool metal edge of the medallion. Ha! I muttered aloud to no one in particular, the sound somewhere between a laugh and a sigh of existential confusion. It was all getting a bit silly now. The Star of Valor, normally reserved for soldiers who threw themselves on grenades or civilians who stopped catastrophes, awarded to a student who'd essentially gotten into a supernatural Mexican standoff with an apocalyptic orc pope. Not exactly what the founders of the award had in mind, I'd wager. Not that I was going to complain. I wasn't nearly that noble. Free rewards were still free rewards, and if the world insisted on handing me shiny symbols of national appreciation, I wasn't going to be the idiot who turned them down on principle. The look on Headmaster Eva's face when I'd received it had been nearly worth the near-death experience. A complex cocktail of pride, irritation, and the resigned acceptance of someone watching their insurance premium skyrocket in real time. But medals weren't the only thing looming. It was now November, which meant only one thing. The Inter-Academy Festival was coming. A childish name, all things considered. Something between a sports day and a martial arts world war. Wrapped in banners and broadcasted in high def across half the planet. Students from every prestigious magical academy gathering to measure themselves against each other in combat, magic, and various specialized disciplines. Career-making performances, international recruiters, and more corporate sponsorship than a race car with an identity crisis. And still, my heart was thudding in my chest like a war drum. I wanted to win. Not because the world needed saving. Not for the sake of peace or duty or the pursuit of truth. I just wanted to be the strongest. The most powerful. The one who stood above everyone else and looked down at the field like a chess player holding the final piece. There was something pure about it. This desire stripped of noble motivation or grand purpose. Just raw ambition, naked and honest. The kind that would have been called unhealthy in my previous life, but here, in this world, it was practically expected. The bare minimum for someone in Class A. But ambition, as always, was a ladder full of missing rungs. I walked into Class 2A, my mind still chewing on plans and possibilities, only for my senses to prickle the moment the door slid shut behind me. A pulse of something like static across the soul. My fingers itched. My lips twitched. The ambient mana in the room felt different, charged with competing auras that brushed against my awareness like sandpaper. Lucifer. He looked at me from his seat with those unnatural, verdant eyes of his, a slow, knowing smile curling on his lips. The air around him felt sharp, like a blade honed so finely it cut the wind. Not just controlled mana, but something more fundamental, a concept made manifest. Sword intent. The idiot actually pulled it off. Without even stepping fully into low integration rank, the Golden Boy had reached a domain most people only dreamed of after decades of work and 3 near-death experiences. His smile wasn't arrogant exactly. It was something worse, confident. The quiet self-assurance of someone who knows exactly where they stand in the hierarchy of power and is perfectly comfortable with their position. The smile of a predator who doesn't need to roar. And then there was Ren. He was quieter now. Less of a storm and more of a simmer. The usual disdain and competitive snark were gone, replaced by something deeper, something more dangerous. Resolve. His fists sat calmly on the desk, but there was a pressure to them, a tension in his frame like coiled steel beneath the surface. Fist intent. Another one. Just like Lucifer, he'd reached the level of intent before integration. And, judging by the subtle shift in his gaze, the god's eyes were changing, too sharper, more focused, as if he were seeing through things rather than merely looking at them. There was no arrogance in his expression anymore. Just a quiet fire that hadn't been there before. A hunger to climb, to catch up, and maybe to beat us both. He met my gaze for a brief moment, his violet eyes acknowledging without speaking. Not respect exactly, but recognition. We were pieces on the same board now. I sat in my seat, eyes half-lidded, thoughts spinning. Ren had changed. In the novel, he was always Lucifer's rival. Up until Lucifer unlocked his second gift and shot ahead like a rocket with no fuel limit, leaving everyone else in the dust. After that, Ren had grown bitter, his rivalry poisoned by the knowledge that the gap between them was unbridgeable. But things were different now. Ren had seen what Lucifer and I were becoming, and instead of giving up, he doubled down. Something inside him had caught flame, and that made things infinitely more interesting, because this wasn't just about one protagonist anymore. This was a battlefield, and I could feel the war for the top finally beginning. The classroom door slid open with a pneumatic hiss after I settled into my seat. Instructor Nero entered, his usual expressionless face somehow conveying disapproval without changing a single muscle. He carried a tablet under one arm, likely containing detailed assessments of our third mission performances. The room fell silent immediately. For all his lack of outward emotion, Nero commanded respect through sheer presence. Even Cecilia, who typically treated authority figures with casual disdain, straightened slightly in her seat. "Class," Nero began, setting the tablets on his desk with a precise movement. "I've completed my evaluation of your third mission performances. As expected, most of you met or exceeded the basic requirements." His gray eyes swept across the room, pausing momentarily on me. Some of you, however, seemed determined to turn simple assignments into international incidents. A few students chuckled nervously. I maintained my neutral expression, though I could feel Rose's amused glance from the seat behind me. "I will distribute your individual assessments shortly. Before that, I should note that the Western Front Mission Group's evaluation had to be adjusted due to unexpected circumstances." Again, his gaze flickered to me. "While the mission was cut short, the data gathered and the actions taken during the confrontation with the Savage Communion have been thoroughly analyzed." He began distributing the tablets, his movements efficient and precise. Each student received their evaluation with varying degrees of anticipation or nonchalance. "As a reminder," Nero continued, "these assessments will factor into your overall ranking for the Inter-Academy Festival selection process. Those with exceptional evaluations will be given priority consideration for the more prestigious events." When my tablet reached me, I activated it with a touch. The screen illuminated with detailed metrics: combat readiness, tactical awareness, adaptability, team coordination, and more. At the bottom, in bold letters, A+. Rachel leaned over, her hair brushing my shoulder as she peered at my screen. "A+? After what you pulled? The Academy's standards must be slipping." I glanced at her tablet. "Also A+. Or perhaps they're rewarding creative problem-solving," I replied. Nero cleared his throat, drawing our attention back to the front. "For transparency, I will announce the overall grades. From the Western Front Group, Arthur Nightingale, Rachel Creighton, Rose Springshaper, and Clanna Alaric, all A+. Clanna raised her head from her desk where she'd been napping, looking momentarily disoriented before processing the information. "Oh, nice," she mumbled, before her head dropped back down. From the Northern Front, Lucifer Windward and Ren Kagu, A+. Cecilia Slatemark, A. Lucifer nodded, as if merely confirming what he already knew. Ren's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened slightly on the edge of his desk. From the Southern Front, Ian Vizirian, Jean Ashbluff, Serafina Zenith, A. Ian grinned, apparently pleased with his assessment, while Cecilia examined her nails with practiced indifference and Serafina just looked blankly without a care in the world. "These grades reflect not just your individual performances, but your contributions to your teams and your adaptability in the field," Nero explained. "Those who received A+ demonstrated exceptional skill or judgment under pressure." His eyes found mine again, and this time there was a flicker of something almost like amusement. Or, in some cases, a unique talent for turning potential disasters into diplomatic victories. He closed his tablet with a snap. "Now, with the third mission evaluations complete, we turn our attention to the Inter-Academy Festival." Chapter 307. "Now we have many events for the preliminary events," Nero said, his voice cutting through the classroom chatter with effortless authority. He stood at the front, posture rigid as always, but there was something different in his eyes today. A spark of what might have been excitement in a normal person, or at least mild interest in his case. "After the preliminary events, the top 20 ranked students will enter the final event, the Crown Challenge." He paused, letting the name hang in the air. Several students shifted in their seats, exchanging glances. This event will be explained later. Don't worry about it now. Before that, you have to participate in 2 events from the choices I will give you. He clicked on his tablet, the subtle movement of his finger triggering the Academy's advanced projection system. A holographic display materialized in front of us, shimmering with light that organized itself into categories and descriptions. The quality was impeccable, no flickering, no distortion, just clean magical engineering at its finest. These are the available events, all team-based, Nero explained, gesturing to the display with a precise sweep of his hand. Choose any 2 you wish. Your performance in these events will determine your ranking going into the Crown Challenge. Choose wisely, not just events you think you can excel in, but ones that will showcase your abilities to the international audience. The classroom hummed with whispers as students leaned forward to examine the options. I barely needed to look. The novel had detailed most of these events extensively, and I'd been planning my strategy for weeks. Nero expanded the first listing with a flick of his fingers. First option, Mana Fortress Defense. Teams of 4 will construct and defend magical fortresses while simultaneously attacking opponent structures. The Academy has developed specialized construction runes that will allow for impressive architectural manifestations without permanent damage to the grounds. The hologram shifted to show a miniature fortress with glowing walls and defensive arrays. Several students made appreciative noises. Second, Dimensional Labyrinth. Teams navigate through a multidimensional maze where spaces fold and shift. You'll face combat, puzzles, and environmental hazards that will test your adaptability under pressure. The projection transformed into a twisting corridor that seemed to bend back on itself impossibly, sections of it fading in and out of view. Third, Elemental Conquest. Teams compete to control elemental nodes scattered across a constructed landscape. Each captured node enhances your elemental affinity while weakening opponents. The hologram displayed floating orbs of different colors: red for fire, blue for water, brown for earth, and white for air, with mana streams connecting them. Fourth, Tactical Siege. One team defends while another attacks, then roles reverse. Points awarded for both successful defense and efficient offense. The display showed a fortress with defending teams on the battlements and attacking forces approaching with siege equipment. Fifth, Phantom Fleet Command. Naval warfare using mana constructs on the Academy Lake. Teams navigate and battle on conjured ships that respond to your mana manipulation. The hologram displayed sleek vessels on churning waves, magical cannons firing bursts of colored light. Sixth, Ascension Tower Challenge. Teams race to climb a tower with shifting architecture and increasing difficulty. Each level presents new challenges requiring different skill combinations. The projection showed a spiraling tower with sections that rotated and rearranged themselves, studded with traps and guardian constructs. Seventh, Boundary Breach. Alternating between defense and infiltration of warded territories. This tests both your ability to create security systems and to bypass them. The hologram displayed a complex network of overlapping magical barriers surrounding a central artifact. Eighth, Miasma Purification Challenge. Navigate through simulated miasma zones, purifying corrupted areas and retrieving valuable materials. This event particularly tests your resilience and purification abilities. The display showed swirling clouds of purple-black energy with pathways cutting through them. Ninth, Artifact Synthesis Race. Construct functioning magical artifacts within time constraints, then field test them in practical applications. The hologram showed workbenches with glowing materials and tools, surrounded by testing grounds. And 10th, Tactical Simulation. Command mana constructs representing military units in a large-scale battle simulation, competing to achieve strategic objectives. The display showed miniature soldiers, cavalry, and magical units arranged in formation across a battlefield. Rachel leaned over to me, her golden hair falling forward as she whispered, "Which ones are you thinking? Elemental Conquest looks perfect for my purification abilities." I nodded absently, my eyes already scanning the sign-up sheet appearing on our personal tablets. I had already decided weeks ago. I selected Boundary Breach and Tactical Simulation, tapping my selections before most students had even finished reading the descriptions. I knew from the novel that these 2 events would not only showcase my strategic thinking and adaptability, but would also place me in direct competition with the other high-tier students I needed to measure myself against. I noticed Lucifer making his selections with similar speed and confidence. Our eyes met briefly, and that same knowing smile played across his lips. He knew what I was doing, or thought he did. Ren, meanwhile, studied the options with uncharacteristic intensity. His violet eyes narrowed in concentration. "You have until the end of the day to submit your selections," Nero announced, closing the holographic display with a gesture. His authoritative voice echoed in the suddenly quiet classroom. "Once chosen, you cannot change your events. Team assignments will be finalized by the end of the week. Each event has a limit of 10 students, given on a first-come, first-served basis. You are dismissed for now." As soon as Nero stepped out of the classroom, a sudden rush of movement caught my peripheral vision. In what could only be described as a coordinated attack disguised as casual interest, my desk was suddenly surrounded. "What are you choosing?" the four of them asked in perfect unison, as if they'd rehearsed it, which, knowing them, they might have. Their gazes, initially fixed on me, rapidly shifted to each other, narrowing with silent territorial warnings. The temperature around my desk seemed to drop several degrees despite Rachel's natural warmth. I leaned back in my chair, pretending not to notice the silent warfare happening over my head. "Boundary breach and tactical simulation," I replied calmly, watching their reactions with carefully concealed amusement. "Boundary breach? Excellent choice." Rose nodded approvingly, her violet eyes calculating something far beyond the simple event selection. The perfect blend of defensive and offensive magic application. "I've selected it as well." She adjusted her perfectly straight tie with one hand, a gesture that somehow managed to bring her slightly closer to me while maintaining her composure. "How fortunate," Cecilia drawled, her crimson eyes gleaming with sardonic humor. "I've also chosen Boundary Breach. What a remarkable coincidence that we've all selected the same event." Her golden hair cascaded over one shoulder as she leaned further onto my desk, claiming more territory with casual dominance. Almost as if someone suggested it would be advantageous to form alliances early. Rachel frowned, her sapphire eyes darkening slightly. "I've chosen Elemental Conquest and Miasma Purification," she said, tucking a strand of golden hair behind her ear. "My purification abilities will be essential for the Miasma event." She placed a hand on my arm, the touch gentle but deliberate. "But I could reconsider my selections if you think we should partner in one of your events, Arthur. I want to make sure you're properly supported." Translation: "She doesn't want you spending too much time with us without supervision," Cecilia Stage whispered, earning a glare from Rachel that could have purified miasma through sheer intensity. Serafina, still standing behind me, spoke without moving closer. Her voice carried the crisp clarity of mountain air. "I've selected Tactical Simulation," she stated simply. "The event allows for optimal application of strategic theory with minimal unnecessary physical contact." Her ice blue eyes swept over the other three girls with clinical detachment. "Arthur's presence would be a logical advantage for any team. And here I thought you chose it because you genuinely enjoyed Arthur's company," Rose observed with calm precision. "How refreshing to know it's purely tactical." Serafina's expression remained unchanged, though the temperature around us seemed to drop another degree. "Enjoyment is irrelevant to optimal performance." "I'm sure Arthur appreciates being referred to as optimal performance," Cecilia smirked, earning the half-elf's cool stare. I cleared my throat, finally interrupting what was rapidly becoming a four-way tactical negotiation over my choice of events, and possibly my soul. "I've already submitted my choices. Boundary Breach and Tactical Simulation offer the best showcase for my particular skill set." Chapter 308. I exhaled as I finally stopped my sword, finishing the final movement of the Tempest Dance technique that I could manage. The practice blade hummed softly as it cut through the air one last time, then fell silent as I held it steady, my breathing controlled despite the exertion. A fine sheen of sweat covered my body, testament to the hours I'd spent in the Academy's private training room, repeating the same sequence until my muscles burned and my mind narrowed to a laser focus. Finally, I had achieved a depth realm of mastery in the art with all my hard work. I wasn't a master yet, but adept realm meant I could execute the entire sequence without a single wasted movement, each strike flowing into the next with the inevitability of rainfall becoming rivers. After the third mission, there was nothing much to do other than train and push myself more for the Inter-Academy Festival. And finally, it was paying out for me. Weeks of grueling practice, of breaking my body down and building it back stronger, of studying techniques until I dreamed of sword forms and mana circulation patterns. All of it had brought me to this moment, standing on the precipice of a breakthrough that would fundamentally change my capabilities. "You're ready?" Luna informed me, her voice echoing in my mind with unusual solemnity. No teasing remarks or sarcastic observations. Just a simple confirmation of what I already knew to be true. I exhaled as I nodded, feeling the white mana core inside my sternum. The core wasn't just a reservoir of power anymore. It had become a nexus, a foundation upon which I could build something far greater. It was time to complete the final stage of the integration process and reach low integration rank. I set my practice sword aside, moving to the center of the training room. The academy had spared no expense in these facilities. Reinforced walls that could withstand considerable magical discharge, automated healing arrays embedded in the floor, and mana circulation systems that would prevent energy backlash from damaging the wider structure. I needed all of those safety features now. Integration wasn't just another rank up. It represented a fundamental shift in how a mage interacted with mana. Instead of simply drawing power from within and without, integration meant exactly what the name suggested, integrating mana completely into one's body, dissolving the core that had previously served as a container and allowing that power to flow freely through every cell. The benefits were enormous. A 70% boost to mana quality and quantity, significantly enhanced physical capabilities, and the ability to execute techniques with a level of precision previously impossible. The foundation for truly extraordinary power. The risks were just as significant. If done incorrectly, the dissolving core could damage one's mana circuits permanently, or worse, cause a catastrophic energy discharge that would leave nothing but ash where a promising mage once stood. I sat cross-legged on the floor, closing my eyes and steadying my breathing. The preliminary work had already been done over months of careful preparation. Strengthening my mana circuits, expanding my core's capacity, and perfecting my control over internal energy flows. Now came the culmination. "Let's do this," I murmured, as much to Luna as to myself. I began drawing mana from the atmosphere around me, pulling it into my body in carefully measured streams. Unlike my previous training, where I had forced mana through my circuits to break and rebuild them stronger, this required absolute precision. Too much pressure and the core would resist dissolution. Too little and the process would stall halfway, leaving me in a dangerous limbo. The first tendrils of pain began spreading through my chest as my core responded to the external pressure. Not the sharp, immediate agony of torn circuits, but something deeper and more pervasive, the discomfort of fundamental change. "Focus on the boundaries," Luna advised. "The core isn't meant to be solid. It's an artificial constraint, a training wheel. Remind it of what it truly is." I followed her guidance, concentrating on the edges of my mana core. In my mind's eye, I could see it. A sphere of compressed white energy, pulsating with potential. I imagined those edges softening, becoming permeable, allowing the energy to seep outward into the surrounding tissue. The pain intensified as the process began in earnest. Sweat beaded on my forehead, no longer from physical exertion but from the internal battle being waged inside my body. My muscles tensed involuntarily as waves of mana began to escape the dissolving core, seeking pathways through my system. This was the critical moment, guiding that freed energy not into a chaotic explosion but into a controlled integration with every cell in my body. I visualized a network, a perfect lattice extending from my sternum outward, providing channels for the mana to follow. My breath caught as the first major surge hit, a rush of power that made my fingers tingle and my vision blur even behind closed eyelids. The core was beginning to collapse in earnest now, its carefully maintained structure giving way to something more primal and fluid. "Don't fight it," Luna cautioned as I instinctively tried to contain the rush. "You're not losing control. You're gaining a new kind of control. Let it flow." I forced myself to relax, to accept rather than resist. The mana spread through my torso, down my limbs, up into my head. Not in a wild torrent but in steady, powerful currents that seemed to illuminate every nerve ending as they passed. The sensation was indescribable, like being filled with liquid light that somehow weighed nothing yet contained immense potential. I could feel my awareness of my own body expanding, becoming more detailed, more precise. Each muscle fiber, each bone, each drop of blood suddenly felt accessible to my consciousness in a way they never had before. A sound escaped my throat. Not quite a groan, not quite a gasp. As the final structure of the core gave way, the remaining concentrated mana rushed outward in all directions at once. A controlled explosion contained entirely within my skin. For one terrifying, exhilarating moment, I felt like I might come apart at the seams, my physical form insufficient to contain the energy surging through it. Then, just as suddenly, equilibrium returned. The mana settled, no longer a separate entity within me but a part of me, as integral to my existence as blood or bone. I opened my eyes, blinking at the mundane reality of the training room. Nothing had visibly changed, and yet everything felt different. The quality of light, the texture of the air, the weight of my own body, all perceived with a clarity that bordered on overwhelming. I raised my hand, watching as mana responded to my thought, flowing to my fingertips without the delay or resistance I had grown accustomed to. Not just faster, fundamentally different. The energy wasn't being channeled from a reservoir. It was already there, present in every part of me, waiting only for direction. Low integration rank. I had done it. A smile spread across my face as I rose to my feet, marveling at the sensation. My muscles felt more responsive, my movements more precise. I picked up my practice sword again, executing a simple cut that somehow felt both effortless and more powerful than before. This, I said aloud, is going to change everything. Don't get cocky, Luna replied, though I could hear the approval in her mental voice. Low integration is just the beginning. You've opened the door. Now you have to walk through it. She was right, of course. The real work was just beginning. Learning to properly utilize this new state of being, to maximize the advantages it offered while avoiding the pitfalls that came with increased power. And beyond that, progressing to mid and high integration rank, each step bringing me closer to the level I would need to face Vorgoth. But for now, standing in the quiet training room with power flowing through me like never before, I allowed myself a moment of pure satisfaction. A milestone reached, a threshold crossed. I was on my way. Chapter 309, Interacademy Festival. The Interacademy Festival revealed just how vast and intricate our world truly was. 5 continents, home to over 10 billion people, each one like its own universe, filled with geniuses and prodigies who vied for dominance. From the icy fortresses of the northern schools to the jungle academies of the southern territories, each region cultivated its own approach to magical mastery. Among them, only the few who reached the pinnacle became radiant rankers, their power standing as a testament to their exceptional skill and dedication, their names whispered with reverence across continents. Now, all those forces, from every corner of the world, were converging here, bringing together what many believed to be the most talented generation ever born. It wasn't just a stroke of fate. It seemed almost as if the year 2031 had gifted the world with an extraordinary abundance of talent, as though the universe itself had decided to raise the stakes of human potential. From what I could observe, excluding the students of Mythos Academy, there were 9 others who had reached a similar level of strength as the members of Class 2A. 9 individuals whose auras carried the unmistakable weight of exceptional ability, whose presence in a room shifted the very atmosphere. I catalogued them mentally, noting their academies, their apparent specialties, any subtle tell that might reveal their true capabilities. Knowledge was power, after all, especially when facing unknown quantities. The commencement ceremony for the Interacademy Festival was about to begin. All 600 students participating in the lower years Interacademy Festival gathered in one venue, the Grand Amphitheater, an architectural marvel that combined ancient design with modern magical enhancements. Designed to amplify not just sound but presence, it allowed even those seated in the furthest rows to feel as though they were mere feet from the central stage. The curved walls were adorned with the banners of every participating academy, a riot of colors and symbols that represented centuries of tradition and rivalry. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation, a palpable energy that crackled like static before a storm. Language barriers dissolved in the universal dialect of ambition, as students sized each other up with sideways glances and whispered assessments. But as the crowd quieted down, all eyes turned toward the podium. She wasn't here to inspire. She was here to lay out the reality. She began, her voice amplified but measured. You're not here to compete for glory. That will come or it won't. You're not here to prove yourselves to others either. By now, you should know that true strength has little to do with public acclaim. She paused, her eyes scanning the sea of faces, assessing us as much as we were assessing her. The silver in her hair caught the light, a testament to decades of experience that none of us could claim. You've trained, fought, bled, and clawed your way to this point. You already know where you stand. This festival is not just a battle to showcase your talents, but to understand the limits of your growth. If you want to rise beyond the ordinary, you'll need more than raw strength. You'll need purpose. You'll need to understand what drives you, because without that, no amount of skill will carry you far. The crowd remained silent, absorbing her words. There was no cheerleading here, no empty praise. Just cold, Hard truth delivered with the precision of a surgeon's knife. I noticed a few students shifting uncomfortably, perhaps confronting for the first time the hollow nature of their motivations. I've seen too many talents wither because they couldn't find what lay beyond their gifts. This festival will test you in ways that have little to do with combat. Think about that as you fight, and you may find yourself at the top. With those final words hanging in the air, Valerie stepped back, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. It wasn't the kind of speech designed to spark excitement, but rather one meant to settle deep within us, to challenge us to think beyond the surface of competition. The crowd remained still, processing the gravity of her message. Then Professor Nero took the stage, his demeanor much more practical, ready to explain the logistics of the festival. His immaculate uniform and sharp, calculated movements provided a stark contrast to Valerie's philosophical approach. His voice carried clearly across the gathering, calm and focused. The first day of the festival, Nero began, will be purely celebratory. Today is for you to enjoy, to meet your peers, and immerse yourself in the spirit of this event. There will be no competitions until tomorrow. A collective exhale rippled through the audience. One day of respite before the storm. The competition portion will span 5 days, Nero continued, activating a hovering magical display that materialized behind him. A complex schedule appeared, color-coded and precise. Each day will host 2 events, one in the morning and one in the evening. This structure allows for adequate recovery time between performances and proper preparation. He gestured to the first line of the schedule. Day 2 will begin with the Mana Fortress defense at 9 a.m., followed by Dimensional Labyrinth at 5 p.m. The display shifted, highlighting the next day's events. Day 3 will feature Elemental Conquest in the morning and Tactical Siege in the evening. Another shift. Day 4 continues with Phantom Fleet Command and Ascension Tower Challenge. The pattern was clear now, methodical and relentless. Day 5 brings Boundary Breach and Miasma Purification Challenge. I noted the positioning of my chosen events, Boundary Breach fairly late in the schedule, giving me time to observe other competitors and refine my strategies. The final competition day, Day 6, will conclude with Artifact Synthesis Race and Tactical Simulation. Following the completion of all 10 team events, rankings will be calculated based on individual and team performance metrics. Nero paused, allowing the information to settle before delivering the most important detail. The top 20 ranked individuals will then advance to the Crown Challenge, which will take place on the 7th and final day of the festival. This event will be explained in detail only to those who qualify. Murmurs rippled through the crowd at this deliberate withholding of information. The unknown final challenge added another layer of complexity to our preparations. We recognize that this schedule means some participants will experience longer gaps between their events than others. This is unavoidable given the logistical constraints of hosting 10 major competitions in 5 days. Nero's tone made it clear this was not up for negotiation. Consider any extended wait periods as opportunities for observation and strategic adjustment. He tapped the display again. Each event will be scored by a panel of judges drawn from all participating academies to ensure fairness. Scoring criteria have been standardized and will be available for review beginning tomorrow morning. Pay particular attention to the section on prohibited techniques and boundary violations. Disqualification will be immediate and non-negotiable. The atmosphere in the amphitheater had shifted from anticipation to focused calculation as students mentally arranged their schedules, plotting recovery times and preparation strategies. I could almost see the gears turning behind hundreds of eyes, each person trying to find the optimal path through the gauntlet that had been laid out. Remember, Nero concluded, his voice taking on a rare edge of emphasis. While this is a competition, it is also a reflection of your academies. Conduct yourselves accordingly. With that final admonition, he stepped back from the podium. The holographic display behind him consolidated into a floating orb that would remain accessible throughout the festival grounds, allowing students to check schedules and locations at any time. As the formal portion of the ceremony concluded and the crowd began to disperse, I remained seated for a moment, mentally mapping out the days ahead. Boundary Breach on Day 5, Tactical Simulation on Day 6, then, if all went according to plan, the Crown Challenge on Day 7. The path was clear. All that remained was execution. Around me, the buzz of conversation grew as students formed groups, some reconnecting with friends from other academies, others engaging in the opening moves of psychological warfare disguised as polite conversation. Chapter 3:10. The formal part of the ceremony was done. Everyone had sat still, looked important, and applauded on cue. Now came the real battlefield, the social part. The air was laced with a low hum of conversation, the clink of glasses, and the subtle shuffle of shoes against the polished marble floor. It was the kind of atmosphere where everyone smiled too much and secretly measured each other's power levels like it was a futuristic role-playing game. Which, to be fair, it kind of was. 5 great academies, one from each continent, were represented here in full regalia and full ego. Slatemark Academy from the central continent, all poised prestige and imperial confidence. Their uniforms trimmed in gold that somehow looked both tasteful and obscenely expensive. Starcrest from the east, full of martial pride and mystique, and Pillin from the north, whose students looked like they'd been surviving blizzards since birth and were wondering what all this warm air was doing in their lungs. Their pale faces flushed slightly in the heated room. And then, of course, Mythos Academy. The host, the crown jewel, the big cheese. "Are you excited, Arthur?" Rachel said as she drifted to my side, her shoulder brushing mine like it was an accident even though we both knew it wasn't. Her golden hair caught the light, creating a halo effect that reinforced her saintess image with almost theatrical precision. "You look excited." Her sapphire eyes studied my face with that particular mixture of genuine care and subtle possession that was uniquely Rachel. She adjusted her formal uniform, a bit more elaborate than our daily wear, with silver trim that emphasized her status, and leaned slightly closer, her perfume carrying notes of vanilla and something floral I couldn't quite identify. "Excited? Yes, absolutely. I wasn't here to survive. Not this time. I was here to win. For the fun of it. For the thrill. For that moment where everyone else is watching, and you know you're the one they're watching for." "I want to win," I said, smiling at her. "Against everyone. I want that moment where everything else fades and it's just victory ringing in your bones." Rachel blinked, like she hadn't expected that level of honesty. Then she tilted her head and gave me one of those radiant saintess smiles that could probably purify minor sins and make flowers bloom out of brick. "Well," she said, "it's nice. I'll be rooting for you. And her voice dropped to a whisper. "You must win." Her hand found mine briefly, a gentle squeeze that conveyed more than words could. "Not just for you. For us. For what we could be." There was something vulnerable in her expression then. A brief glimpse behind the perfect saintess facade to the girl who harbored very human desires and fears. It vanished almost immediately, replaced by her usual warm confidence. "Thanks, Ratch," I said, genuinely touched by the momentary transparency. "I'll give it everything I have." She leaned in a little more, about to say something else. And that's when the air went sugary sweet. The smell of honey and mild hostility floated in. I turned, and there they were, Cecilia and Serafina, flanking me like twin moons on either side of a rather unfortunate planet. "Arthur," Cecilia purred, her crimson eyes gleaming with mischief as she sidled up to my right side. Her golden hair was arranged in an elaborate style that somehow managed to look both effortless and like it had taken hours to perfect. "We have boundary breach together, isn't that just perfect? You, me, and a battlefield." She tapped my chest with one perfectly manicured nail. "I do so enjoy breaking through your boundaries." Rachel's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "I also have tactical simulation with Arthur," Serafina said, her voice calm and cool, like a glacier pretending not to be jealous. The half-elf stood to my left, her silver hair falling like a curtain of moonlight down her back, her posture regal and distant despite her obvious interest in staking her claim. "Our tactical compatibility is optimal. Other partnerships would be inefficient by comparison." "I'm in that too," Rachel added, not to be outdone, her arm sliding through mine with practiced casualness. "Arthur and I have already discussed our strategy, haven't we?" We hadn't, but I wasn't about to contradict her in the middle of this increasingly tense four-way standoff. "And I've got boundary breach as well," Rose declared as she practically teleported in from the void like a cheerful ninja with auburn hair. She appeared just behind me, her violet eyes sparkling with intelligence and something that might have been amusement at the situation she'd just walked into. "I thought we might coordinate our approach, Arthur. My paradox manipulation works quite well with your improvisational style." Within seconds, I was the center of a planetary alignment of dangerous affections. 4 of the strongest young women in the world, standing in a loose square of territorial energy, all subtly eyeing each other like diplomats who knew the war was only on pause. "Isn't this cozy?" Cecilia observed, her tone dripping with honeyed venom. "The 4 of us all competing collaborating with Arthur." She pointedly examined Rachel's grip on my arm. Though some seemed to be taking the physical aspect of teamwork quite literally. Physical contact enhances coordination, Serafina stated flatly, though her ice-blue eyes narrowed slightly. Though excess is unnecessary. We're all friends here, Rose said diplomatically, though her smile had an edge to it. Besides, Arthur appreciates having options. Don't you, Arthur? The loaded question hung in the air like a grenade with the pin half pulled. What Arthur appreciates, I began carefully, is talented teammates who can focus on winning rather than fighting over him like he's the last lifeboat on a sinking ship. Cecilia finished for me, her smile widening. But that's half the fun, darling. Before the gravity of that emotional singularity could collapse into open skirmish, I slipped sideways like a magician doing a coin trick and made a beeline for someone safer. Alara, Naomi. Fancy meeting you here, I called, zeroing in on the two girls from Slatemark Academy I'd first met at the Tower of Magic conference what felt like several lifetimes ago. Behind me, I heard Cecilia's melodic laugh, Rachel's frustrated sigh, Rose's diplomatic perhaps we should discuss this later, and Serafina's cool, tactical retreat noted. Hey Arthur, Alara said with her signature calm smile, violet eyes twinkling. There was something deeply relaxing about her presence, like a soft-spoken librarian who could also collapse a building with a flick of her hand. Naomi just waved, eyes bright, smile unfiltered. In my mind, Luna let out a long, exasperated sigh. Running from your harem straight into more girls. Classic Arthur. What the hell do you mean, classic Arthur? Don't play dumb with me, you lady magnet, she grumbled. At this rate, we'll need a spreadsheet just to keep track of your complicated relationships. I sighed internally. Externally, I kept the smile. I turned my attention fully to Alara, because talking to her was like wrapping your brain in a warm blanket. She had that soft, measured way of speaking that made even